Welcome, everyone, to Accented Dialogues in Diaspora. My name is Philip Nguyen. I'll be your co-host for tonight, and today we'll have the honor of speaking with Betty Duong and Vicky Nguyen for our show on trailblazing in real time Vietnamese women in the public eye. Accented is a production of the Diasporic Vietnamese Artist Network, or DVAN, and our mission is to amplify Diasporic Vietnamese and Southeast Asian literary voices. We empower artists in the diaspora and champion our complex and diverse stories, ensuring our perspectives reshape and expand the broader cultural narrative. And y'all can learn a little bit more about the Diasporic Vietnamese Artist Network, or DVAN, by visiting us at dvan.org and by supporting us by donating at dvan.org/donate. If you're watching the show with us tonight or you're listening to this later on the podcast, please be sure to also follow us on our social media at weare_DVAN. Really grateful to have all of y'all here on the Zoom with us tonight, who are chiming in and sharing what you're having for eating or drinking for dinner. For those of y'all that are listening to us or would like to hear this conversation back again, we are on anywhere you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, I think. So for this conversation is the 55th accented episode that we've done since the pandemic. We've had the wonderful opportunity to talk to so many guests and bring them onto our show. I have the distinct honor and pleasure to introduce Mr. Viet Nguyen, who is the Pulitzer Prize winning author of The Sympathizer, its sequel, The Committed, and his memoir, A Man of Two Faces. Viet is a university professor at the University of Southern California for the next couple of weeks, and a co-founder for DVAN, in addition to being the co-host for Accented. I think this is like our fourth or fifth year going on this, Viet, but welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much for that introduction, Philip. I'm really thrilled to have our guests with us tonight for this really special show. Our first guest is Betty Duong. She represents more than 400,000 San Jose, California residents on the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors. She proudly represents District 2, which I believe would have been my district if I was still living in San Jose. It's comprised of downtown, the east side, Little Saigon, and the surrounding neighborhoods. She is the proud daughter of immigrants and the first Vietnamese American and the first Asian American woman to serve on the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors. Hello, Betty. Our other guest is Vicky Nguyen. She is an NBC News Chief Consumer Investigative Correspondent, anchor of NBC News Daily, and the New York Times best-selling author of the new memoir, Boat Baby. She reports for the Today Show, Nightly News with Tom Llamas, and NBC News Now. She graduated as valedictorian from the University of San Francisco. Vicky lives in New York with her husband and 3 daughters. Hello, Vicky. So I am thrilled to have both of you groundbreaking, trailblazing Vietnamese American women who are doing the Vietnamese American community proud in your respective fields of politics and of journalism. And as we speak now, on April 16th, 2026, the news is bad for for politicians. Eric Swalwell, once considered to be a front runner for the California gubernatorial elections, has suspended his or quit his campaign because of very serious allegations of sexual harassment, sexual violation, rape. And Justin Fairfax, former lieutenant governor of Virginia, apparently killed his wife and committed suicide this morning. Now, these events touch on the world of politics, but also on the world of journalism, covering these types of this type of news. But they also touch on our topic today because these are very powerful men in very public positions in politics who have done terrible things or are alleged to have done terrible things, and they intersect with the worlds that you're in, Betty, as a politician, and Vicky, as I'm sure someone who has to cover this kind of news. And of course, it also intrudes upon your personal realities as women and as Asian American and Vietnamese American women, who I'm sure have had to face many, many obstacles along the way, including obstacles presented to you by men. And I'm here to say, as a man, that we are responsible. Okay, we live in a patriarchal world. It doesn't matter if you happen to be a particularly good man or an exceptional man, and we're all as men responsible for these types of things. And I do want to start us off talking about these because I don't think we should turn away from the news, from what's happening right now. And I bring this up just to get the temperature in the room from the two of you about what you make out of this horrible news that's taking place. And Betty, let's start with you because I think it's very close to your world as someone who is a politician in California.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Viet, and thank you so much, Philip, for having me on here. I've been a fan of you both for a very long time, so I'm really happy to be here. I'm not happy about the news right now. I think locally, nationally, and globally, we're facing very dire times, and every single time I get another message, another ping, another alert from my team, from the world, it's more bad news. That's what it feels like these days. Now, I mean, what we're seeing at with Eric Swalwell, with the former lieutenant governor, I mean, it's just a huge tragedy that we have two children who are without their parents today, as of this morning. And sadly, devastatingly, this type of political violence is not new. This type of violence from men in relationships and intimate partner violence and domestic violence is not new. The type of violence that comes along with positions of power, which has traditionally been held by men historically, is not new. And there's a lot of undoing that's required of that. And what I'm hearing a lot, even in the wake of what's happening to the United Farm Worker Movement and the revelations about Cesar Chavez,
Mm.
um, people keep on saying things like, "Oh, like why now? Why wait so long? Or why bring it up now?" There's never a good time to bring up
Mhm.
violence. Never a good time. There's never a polite time to have these conversations, and these offenses don't happen in polite spaces either. So I'm glad that you're asking this question. This is a conversation that needs to happen. These are the type of conversations that need to happen and I think in every workspace, in every board meeting, in every organizing space, how do we protect women and how do we protect the vulnerable? And how do we now root the rot of violence and maliciousness and abuse of power in these power structures and dynamics? And I just want to say, in my defense, I've only been a politician for a year and 4 months. So I'm easing my way into it, and I'm still learning how to wear my title and role as supervisor. And I will tell you this, that the harsh reality is that even, like I grew up translating for my parents. I grew up thinking that if I had the right words, if I was a lawyer, I would be protected. Then I thought if I had the really fancy job, I'd be protected. Then it's just you think about that, and as women, as girls, we think about where would be the spaces of safety for me? What do I need to do? And that's not on our women and our girls. So I love what you said, Viet. This is on the men who hold the power in a very patriarchal society that's still historically rooted in those tenets. And how do we build this world safely for women and girls?
Vicky, this is news, but not news all at the same time. It's as Betty has said, we've seen this happen before, and unfortunately, we probably will see it happen again. And you, as a journalist, have had to cover many of these types of things. What's your reaction to the news?
Well, first of all, the fact that Supervisor Young said that she's only been in a political position for a year and 4 months, but could speak so eloquently about what is happening in our world, not only as a public servant, but also as a woman, as someone who comes from an immigrant community, as a minority, I think speaks to what I believe are the solutions. I appreciate so much, Viet and Philip, that you're platforming to Vietnamese women today with your podcast and that you speak to these difficult issues and that you accept some of the collective responsibility and recognition that, yes, we live in a society that is not fair, probably will never be fair, and that the people in power are the ones that we do need to rely on to help us change and move toward a better, safer, more egalitarian world order. I think it does begin with women stepping up too, and women claiming their voices, and women taking up space, and women running for positions where they can make a difference for others. And it is certainly easier said than done. It is something I think about all of the time, just by virtue of being on a national network with my last name, your last name. It's like the Smith of Vietnamese last names. And I think that just showing up every day, in the spaces that we occupy and not being afraid to use our voices and to stand up for other people and to see what we can do to make our piece of the world a better place. There is a, there's a responsibility for all of us, but I'm glad that we're talking about it. And I think that sometimes people feel powerless. And what I say to that is start small. Start in your own circle. We all have some sort of sphere of influence. It could be our family and friends. That's enough, right? Having the difficult conversations, trying to move ourselves to a place that is better, safer. I don't know, having the tough conversations. I think that's what we try to do is we try to make sure that we empower people with the knowledge of what's happening in their world. And we try to put voices on like Supervisor Jung and others to enlighten us and platform experts who can help us make sense of what's happening. And sometimes it is just talking about it. Sometimes it's not getting to a solution or an answer right away. But I'm really glad that we are addressing it head on. I think that that's probably one of the most powerful things that we can do.
We're going to get into all of the obstructions and challenges that you have faced in your respective professions and your lives. But I want to start on a more intimate note because I think we do share something in common as Vietnamese American people. Betty, you live in San Jose. I grew up in San Jose, California in the 70s and 80s. Vicky, you were in the Bay Area. And I have to say that when I say that, men have to take responsibility, I'm also speaking from a very particular position as well of being a Vietnamese American growing up in a Vietnamese refugee community that I thought was really deeply, deeply patriarchal. I wouldn't have used that term when I was growing up in the 70s and the 80s, but I think that was the reality. I as a young man, I did not have a lot of expectations put on me by my parents outside of just having to study and make them proud. But I was quite aware that my girl cousins had a totally different reality that they had to deal with. So, for example, I could go away to any university I wanted. My cousins, the boys, could go to any university they wanted. The girl cousins had to stay close to home to San Jose, California. They had domestic chores. They had to do things in the house that the boys didn't have to do, and certainly I didn't have to do. I'm just wondering, the way that you grew up, does this sound familiar to you? Did you face these kinds of challenges within your own upbringing, whether it's within your own families or whether it was in the larger, Vietnamese community that you grew up in, where you felt that there was a different set of expectations and responsibilities that were put on you, not even by the outside world, but just simply by Vietnamese culture? Betty, what do you think?
I mean, most definitely. I think what you were just reminiscing about is something that's very familiar to so many of us. I feel like I had a personally very unique upbringing or exposure to this. That first, I come from a family of all girls, and but raised by a very machismo dad. Like, I mean, you talk about the Jew highs of the world. That's my dad, right? So my Heineken drinking, Hennessy shooting, dad, and he, I mean, to my shock and horror, whenever I meet his friends or another relative from back in the day, they talk about what a man's man he was and what a ladies man he was. Like, oh, please don't tell me that, I don't want to hear it. So I think around, yeah, around 9 or 10, so we're three sisters. It's me, my next sister, we're a year and 2 weeks apart. And then our youngest sister is 10 years younger than me. So that was the last attempt on my dad's part to have a son. He so desperately wanted a son. And he made that very clear. There was no nuance to this conversation. He's just like, I need a legacy, right? So I'm being raised hearing this type of language. We have a baby sister. And then he sits me and my sister Kathy down at age 10 and 9, and he basically says, he takes a swig of his beer and he says, okay, I'm gonna give it to you straight. This world is effed up to you, to women, to girls. I'm not gonna have any sons. I'm gonna accept that. So I need to build you tough. I need to get you ready for the world. And it was like my first birds and bees conversation with my dad. And so it was the expectations, the difference between women and men, girls and boys was almost like it was signaled to me very clearly, but framed in a way that was unfair to me. So now my dad's the biggest feminist I know. So I don't know if that helps any, but that was how my sisters and I were raised. And if you ever meet me and my sisters, I don't think that backstory is going to be anything of a surprise.
I mean, you just described the perfect sitcom. You know, Ju Hai becomes a Vietnamese American feminist because of his
Yeah.
three daughters, right? That's beautiful. I love that. It shows that men, Vietnamese men, can actually change for the better. Vicky, what was your
That's
experience?
super progressive. That is so progressive. I have to say, I was raised as an only child, and I don't think gender politics, none of that was a part of my upbringing or my parents' thought process. They were very focused on the hustle and what it takes to like make it in America. So, what I learned from them was a work ethic. What I learned from them just by osmosis was just finding your own way. And some of it was what every refugee family kind of has in their background. Your parents are working so much. They're sometimes 7 days a week, right? You're left to your own devices. And in a lot of ways, I think that helped me develop the kind of resilience and grit that I had. I moved every single year from kindergarten through fifth grade. So I had like a new school, new friends, new cities, and that wasn't fun when I was a kid. But I do think there's something to be said about when you struggle as a kid, when you encounter hardship young, it helps you so much when you're an adult because you've kind of been through a lot of things. And so there's not a lot that I think can throw you. And I think about that a lot now as I'm raising three daughters. What are the things that are difficult for them? Where do I need to manufacture hardship for them? For me, it was built in, right? Like my parents had to just do all of the things. I had to kind of learn how to become an American kid on my own. The birds and bees talk was never had. They relied on schools to educate me about that. When it was drugs, it was just say no. That was the campaign. There it is. They were like the never complain, never explain type parents. And that left me a lot to like looking to my peers, looking to what was on TV at the time to figure things out. And I think that in retrospect, I mean, I think it worked out okay for me. But it was not, I don't think it was by design, it was out of necessity. And so we didn't have those kinds of conversations. And I just kind of learned along the way. And I definitely know what it's like to be a woman in a male dominated field or one of the only people of color in a room or, just any number of like, you're one of one wherever you are. And I think the quicker you develop a comfort level with that, the easier your path will be, honestly, because you've been there before.
Mhm. Yeah, I think just kind of riffing off that, like just being both of y'all are kind of in your own way, one of one. You're both like very public in each of your respective fields. I think both of you claim in different ways like your own Vietnamese American, Asian American woman identity. Both of you, I think, I believe, are mothers at the same time. As very, very visible public Vietnamese American women in your fields, do y'all feel this sort of like responsibility or this burden of responsibility to be representative of a Vietnamese or Asian American community? And how is it that y'all navigate that pressure? Like, who is it that you look to? Maybe a part of my question is also like, where did y'all have those sorts of role models, like femtors or mentors, in your own trajectory or journey? I'll start with
Oh,
you,
oh, what a
Vicky.
cool word, femtor. I have not heard that. That's a new one for me. I will just say, growing up, I definitely looked to Thuy Vu, who was a reporter in the Bay Area, just Vietnamese American, knew she was on television. It took me a long time to connect the dots, though, in the sense of like I could pursue that myself. I was just a big admirer of her. And when I eventually made it to network news, I mean, I had been watching Betty Nguyen, who had been on CNN before, the first kind of like national Vietnamese American I had ever seen in the news. So there have been, and before that, it was Connie Chung, who, obviously was Chinese, and Ann Curry, who was huge on the Today Show, Japanese. So for me, there were public figures who were Asian American, but even now, as you and I talk in 2026, right? You could probably count them on one and a half hands, really. There are not many of us still to this day. I think of it not as a burden of responsibility. I think of what a gift it is to have the platform that I have. And I consciously make an effort to find those stories. Like I was just researching right now, apparently at Coachella, there are a bunch of like Vietnamese American designers whose clothing is being worn by like
Mm.
Justin Bieber and other,
And Cat's Eye, yeah.
culture stars. And I was like, I'm going to pitch that story and I'm going to interview those people because, yes, I love that Korean Americans are having such a moment, right? From K-pop to K-beauty to K-barbecue to K everything. They are like rocking. And then I think, why aren't Vietnamese Americans out there? Why isn't our culture being represented in the media and with music and all the things? And then I wonder, maybe it's because, we're kind of relatively a young-ish culture. We haven't been here as long as like Chinese Americans have been here or Japanese Americans. But now I'm like, you know what? I can chip away at that. I can contribute to that. I can pitch stories that really shine a spotlight on the Vietnamese American community and what we're doing here. And so that's why I'm so happy when I see somebody like Betty who's doing all of the things and representing it just makes my heart swell. Like I support all the Vietnamese Americans. Like I had Ocean Vuong on my show when he recently had his new book come out. And I like love Viet, and all of his books, bought them all. And I just look for those opportunities to kind of like share and be an amplifier for people in our community. And I think of that as such a privilege and an honor, not a burden.
Yeah, thanks for that, Vicky. And then just shout out also to our resident DJ, DJ Thanh, whose playlist we were listening to at the beginning of the show, featured Thuy, who's the first Vietnamese American woman to play at Coachella last year.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's like these moments like that. Lu Dang is the brand. Literally Grenade is the brand, the Vietnamese brand that Justin Bieber wore his pants for. And then I think there's a Vietnamese designer that designed for Cat's Eye set this past weekend.
Yes.
Um, yeah, Betty, you're the first in your role, a trailblazer yourself, in Vietnamese American San Jose, Santa Clara County, which has oftentimes been divided by identity or identity politics. What's your how do you make sense of your responsibility to be representative of the Vietnamese American community, but also to know that Santa Clara County is made up of so many other ethnic, racial identities? Like, how is it that you navigate that pressure?
Yeah, I want to start with that. So District 2 is very special. There's 5 districts in Santa Clara County. And District 2 is the smallest geographical footprint. So all the districts have the same population size. We're the most densely populated. We have the majority of the county's clients depending on us for safety net services. We're the poorest district in the county. We have over half of the county's unhoused population here in District 2. So District 2 is a challenging district. It's also a beautiful district. This is the home to all of the immigrant ethnic enclaves. Little Saigon, Little Portugal, Little Italy, East Side, Mayfair. Japantown, the original Chinatowns are in this district, and the original Manila town is in this district. So this is a district with a very deep legacy, and that like rooted in the workers' rights movement and the immigrant rights movement and the civil rights movement. So I get to represent this district, which has historically also been the Latino district. So the first time you get an Asian American woman, actually, there's 2 of us this year. When myself and Supervisor Margaret Abe Koga both got elected, we became the 2 first and Asian American women to ever serve on this board. And then to have a Vietnamese supervisor, the only one so far for now, representing this very historical district that has probably the largest share of Vietnamese Americans, but we still are a very new community here. It's a huge privilege. It's a huge honor. And the thing is that when I ran, not a lot of people, I think there were 6 candidates. Not a lot of people knew me. Not a lot of people thought I was going to win. It was a Hail Mary, the way it was described to me, of me to myself. There were 6 candidates out of the gate, and I ranked fifth in name recognition. And I think that's because I grew up and have lived here my whole life. So I feel a great sense of responsibility. Sometimes it feels very heavy to represent the Vietnamese community because I'm the only one and I'm the first in this role. So do it right, do it well. And then I'm also representing this very challenged district that has great need, but also has incredible beauty. I mean, trust me, anything that's trendy, the next viral sensation, the next like viral drink, snack, or trend, art, music comes out of this district first. So don't get me wrong, we got our challenges, but we're also the ones that know how to turn a dollar into five, and we know how to build community, and we know how to build our own realities and our own landscape out here, when the world does not reflect what we need. So there was someone who joked with me at my swearing in ceremony, where it's like, hey, you got to be the perfect Vietnamese and the perfect Latina, to represent this district. So I feel this, and I think, to your question about navigating, like a while ago, just 2 seconds ago, I said you got to do this right and you got to do this well. Right and well is not appeasing everybody. right and well is not always playing it safe. Something that I've learned very quickly in politics is that you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, right? Someone's always going to be unhappy with you. So I rather people be unhappy with me for what I stand for and what I can stand behind. And that's kind of the East Side way, right? Your word is your bond. You do what you say what you mean what you say, and you better follow through with your commitments and promises. And you always have to lead with community first. And I think that holds true for both my Vietnamese community, for my Latino community, for my Japanese American community, for my East Side communities and my downtown neighbors. Like that's always going to hold true. Because also remember, we're the smallest geographical footprint. Everyone's going to see each other. You're always going to end up at the same block, at the same festival, at the same grocery store, at the same restaurant at some point. There's no hiding from it, from your accountability. And the thing is that I navigate this by making sure that I show up every day, ready to work my butt off. Under the best case of circumstances, my last day of work is time certain, and that's going to be December 31st, 2037. So, not all the time you see the projection of your job, right? But all things go well, at midnight on that date, that's the end of this tenure. So I have in total 12 years to work as hard as I can, put it all on the mat and help actualize the hopes and dreams of my residents, my neighbors, and my bosses.
Betty for
Betty,
governor.
Betty for governor, absolutely. Betty, I am from San Jose, California. I grew up there, like I said. I grew up in some of the neighborhoods that you mentioned. In fact, my parents' grocery store, the Saigon, was I think the second Vietnamese grocery store. It is on the location that is now across the street from San Jose City Hall,
Hmm.
and right where my parents' store was is now Starbucks, and on top of it is this really expensive apartment complex. And I could never have imagined that transformation when I was growing up in San Jose in the 70s and 80s as my parents were running that grocery store. And so San Jose has transformed greatly during this time period of the last 40 or 50 years. It's gone from being sort of a backwater to being one of the most expensive communities in the country, to being the bedroom community for Silicon Valley, to being a place where we have now the largest Vietnamese American population is in San Jose, California. It's like something like 140,000 Vietnamese people out of a population of approximately 2 million. So we are a significant cultural and political force in San Jose, California. I'm curious, you've struck a very defiant tone, which I love and appreciate coming out of San Jose. What is the future of Vietnamese Americans in San Jose, California? Will we see a Vietnamese American mayor someday? I know we've had Madison Nguyen ran for mayor of San Jose, California. I feel we have to have a Vietnamese American mayor of San Jose, California in the very, very near future, and it's a very important political position as one of the largest cities in the country. Certainly, very again close to the tech industry. The current mayor is running for governor, so it is a place where we can see the energies of California and the United States intersecting. And again, Vietnamese Americans occupy an important position here. But I feel we've under leveraged. I don't think that Vietnamese Americans in San Jose have lived up to their political potential for many different kinds of reasons. What's our future politically in San Jose and Santa Clara County?
I think that's a good question. I think there's no shortage of very talented people in the world right now. Vietnamese Americans in our community. We have Vietnamese Americans in spaces of organizing, um, organizing around immigrant rights, organizing around labor rights, organizing against the gig economy. There's a lot of presence, and ever since I took office, the influx of emails and messages and the DMs, right? From starting with, I'm a Vietnamese American woman, I'm a Vietnamese American girl, I'm a Vietnamese American student. I want to know about more about your journey. I want to figure out a way to follow that. So the ambition is there. The community space is there. And what I really hope is that the mentorship is there. The mentorship, right, is there to help navigate these conversations about what is the political identity that you want. And I think this goes for everybody, Vietnamese or not, writ large. Why do you want to be in office? Why would you, there's something very, very alluring about power. I get that, right? I hope it's not just for that. So what I really hope is that that we have a trajectory of good leadership coming up in the future. Now, there's no shortage of leadership, period. There's a lot of very industrious and ambitious young men and women, and I feel like every subsequent generation, every like eighth grade class that I meet, every 12th grade class that I speak at, and get to engage with the students, they get smarter and smarter and smarter, like with every single year. So there's no lack of that, of talent, but I just hope that, going back to the top of this conversation, when you asked about what's happening in the political landscape right now when it comes to violence, when it comes to offenses and assaults against one another, against the vulnerable, right? Like we really need to make sure that our leaders are being raised with values-based leadership for the right reasons, entering this game for the right reason, and understanding the role that they want to fulfill. I think it's a matter of time before we have a Vietnamese mayor. You take a look at the young Dems, the APA Dems out here in San Jose. It's like 30 to 50% Vietnamese American faces in there. So I see the future being bright. I just hope that the future is righteous.
Very good, very diplomatic answer, Betty Young.
That's
All
solid,
right.
yeah.
That's all. I asked that question out of a personal investment in San Jose, California, and the fact that I think the story of San Jose has changed so much, and Vietnamese Americans have contributed a great deal to the change in that story, and those stories have come from the refugees, the immigrants, the shopkeepers, the everyday people, people like yourself, Betty, who've become politicians. Everybody has tried to tell their own story, and that's changed the story of the city. Now, Vicky, you're in the business of stories. You interview lots and lots of people. You cover the stories of New York and of Asian America and of the United States as a whole. But now you have become a memoirist with this new book, Boat Baby. And as a writer, I'm obviously very, very intrigued by that. Where did this idea for Boat Baby come from? Now, obviously, I know it comes from your life, but like, when did you decide that you needed to write a book, a memoir, and what is it about?
Listen, growing up, books were my gateway to learning how to be an American kid. I read all the Judy Blume, Beverly Cleary, Roald Dahl, all the Encyclopedia Brown books, Sweet Valley Twins, Babysitter's Club, like everything I could get my hands on. So I always had a reverence for writers and authors because I knew how powerful words could be and like how they transported me somewhere and just like, stoked my imagination. And then obviously I write for a living as a journalist. But the backstory for the book is just, it's something that, you always dream to have an ISBN. Like I knew what that was. It means like this is the special serial number that indicates you have a book and everyone recognizes like that's the agreed upon number that identifies your book. I always like had that in the deep, deep, deep in the back of my mind. Like, wouldn't it be so cool to have a book out in the world? But it wasn't until it was just brought to me like, hey, you're at the network now. Maybe you should consider this as, like a natural extension of what you do. And I really was like, I'm 40. I barely have been at the network. Like nobody knows who I am. What am I going to write about? And my TV agent, Tracy, was like, your family story is pretty spectacular. And when she said your family story, the puzzle pieces clicked for me. It was like, oh, of course, my family story. Not about me, but about the how my parents got us all here, the incredible sacrifices they made, and the fact that this isn't a thank you for holding it up. And I mean, I have to say, like, I'm so grateful for that cover and the fact that we even have that photo because that was taken on a refugee camp when I had just learned to walk. I'm maybe 14 months old there. We got there when I was 8 months old. We spent 10 months on that little island. And my parents said that there was a photographer that came to the island, offered to take pictures for people, had to like smuggle the film back to Malaysia. You paid and you weren't sure if they were ever going to come back with your photos, but they did. And so we have that picture of my great aunt, my two uncles, my mom and dad, and me. And that's like one of a couple of photos we have in addition to like our little ID photo with like our, serial numbers underneath us, identifying us as, refugees when we got to the island. Those little black and white photos that I'm sure many of us on this conference call right now have those in our home. So when it was presented to me that it was an opportunity to write a story about my family and about boat people, that is for me what made me take on that second job. Because as you know, or anyone who knows who's ever tried to write a book, it is a whole extra other job, and then the marketing of the book and the selling of the book. It's a whole journey. But I'm so grateful every day that Boat Baby is out there sailing on its little waves. It came out in paperback this week. And of all the things that I have been fortunate enough to accomplish in my life, this one I'm very proud of because of the kind of responses I've gotten from readers. Greek people, people from Lebanon, people from Italy, people from Ireland. Like we're all boat people in some form or fashion, a lot of us are. And so there are so many connection points in this book. And that has meant the world to me to hear from people I never would have otherwise crossed paths with, to say that they saw some part of their own selves or their own families, and that it brought some people to tears, it made some people laugh, like it did all the things I ever could have dreamed that it would do.
I like to say that the original boat people to the United States or the future United States were Christopher Columbus and the Pilgrims, right? And we laud those people as the heroes and heroines and the founders of the United States. But let's give respect to the boat people like the Vietnamese and many other people from different nationalities who have come here and who are now being, persecuted by ICE. That's my personal opinion. That's not necessarily the opinion of our guests on this show, but I will say that. So, Vicky, let's hear a passage from Boat Baby if we could.
Okay, thank you. Both Philip and Viet for picking this one on page 93. So the context here is I'm 11 years old and it's the first time my parents have taken me back to Vietnam since they escaped. The country was sort of opening up. You still had to like bribe everyone to get through the airport, and like, everybody was giving you the side eye because we were Viet Kieu. We were obviously coming back from America, and it was not the most warm and welcoming environment. Very like night and day from the second and third trips I took back when I was like 15 and in my 20s. And now, I mean, gosh, like Gen Z is obsessed with Vietnam. And I love that it's such a tourist friendly country with so much to offer. But back then, it was my first experience going home and meeting like all of my Vietnamese family, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, and seeing so many people who looked like me, but were also so different from me. Um, so I was, meeting a lot of folks for the first time. I wasn't ready for the barrage of hugs and sweaty sniff kisses from people I'd never seen before. I knew we were related. These were my aunts and uncles and cousins surrounding me and smushing their moist faces against my cheeks. It was sensory overload. Rapid fire, shrill voices, shouted in Vietnamese, everyone talking all at once. Oh my, her Vietnamese sounds gung, noted one auntie. That word means hard, and I took it as solid. They were complimenting my Vietnamese language skills. By the third or so reference to my Vietnamese being so cứng, I wasn't sure it was a compliment. I asked my dad what they meant by it. It means you have an accent. Your Vietnamese sound American. Ying is so big. Ying has such short hair. Ying looks like a boy. The hits just kept coming. I had been around enough Vietnamese people that this barrage of criticism did not surprise me. Vietnamese people say the quiet part out loud and right away. If you look heavier than the last time an auntie saw you, you'll hear, Ying, con mập quá. Ying, you're fatter now, right? If you've lost some weight, Ying, tại sao con ốm quá? Ying, why are you so skinny? There is no correct weight. When I was younger, I brought this up to my mom because these comments felt insulting and cruel, but she shrugged it off. They don't mean anything by it. She didn't defend me, but I did notice over time my mom herself stopped commenting on my weight. After a while, I just accepted this way of being greeted. Verbal observations on your appearance are never off limits. They're the first facts established when you meet someone, as long as that person is senior to you. Anyone older can tell you you're fat, skinny, acne riddled, pretty, ugly, too made up, not made up enough, no matter the occasion. It could be a wedding, could be a funeral. The first comment will be about your appearance. It's a given. I was not actually that big, especially not compared to my friends back home. But here, all my cousins, even the older ones, were lean and shorter than I was. Even though communicating was a bit of a challenge, their huge grins and curious eyes made me feel like family, and their energy was contagious. They greeted me like kids finding the prize in a Cracker Jack box. Here I was in person, someone just like them, but totally foreign at the same time.
Mm. Yeah, thank you so much for that passage, Vicky. I think you do well to capture the sort of like in-betweenness that like Vietnamese Americans feel when thinking about their relationship to America, their this homeland or adopted homeland, and then their like quê hương in Vietnam, and sort of like the cultural differences that come up, especially in the language and when we're speaking this broken Vietnamese. I kind of want to like pitch this question over to Betty. You know, and ask you both about your relationship. I mean, the next chapter in your book is called Family, aka Yedin. So I kind of want to ask you both about your family's reception to the career paths that you chose, not only to be a news reporter and a politician, but to be in these very, very publicly visible careers, right? Um, and what their reception has been to you, for you to choose these sort of career pathways, and maybe even how you honor them. Betty, I'll pass it to you. Um,
Um,
and I feel very fortunate to have been able to hear you like speak in in both Vietnamese and in Vietnamese proper, with our community members, especially so many of our elders. So just gonna shout out.
oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm able. I didn't realize I was so good at switching up my Vietlish and Vietnamese, but it's become a new talent. Um, I it's sorry, I'm just having a little. I'm trying to not cough right now. Um,
But do you want to get a drink of water? I can
yeah.
take the first part of the question real quick. I
Yeah.
would
So
just say
sorry.
I'm very grateful my parents did not go full tiger parent and say you have to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer. You know, they were very open to allowing me to choose whatever career. I did think I was going to be a physical therapist, by the way. I did enroll at the University of San Francisco as a biology major, and I thought I was going to be a physical therapist specializing in sports medicine because when those career like lists came out from the government, physical therapy was one of those like fastest growing, projected to be a solid salary, all of the things. And when I switched to communications, my parents supported me and they just gave me the freedom to do this. I don't think any of us ever thought it would end up here. This is probably like, I mean, to me, it's a dream job. It is the pinnacle of what we do is to be able to report at the national level and to have the kind of impact that we do working for an institution like NBC News. It was tough to put it all in the book, the ups and downs of, family life and the kind of struggles that we had in our family financially and some of the changes and evolution that we went through when the power dynamics and the earning structure changed a little bit as like you know, it went from me relying on my parents to a little bit of the reverse. That was tricky to navigate. I think that's
Mm,
kind of the only thing that really sparked a lot of conflict for us. But I think overall they're proud, I think, and they know that it's all the sacrifices that they made, all the hard work that they made, that even any of this success that I have, it's all shared. It is all thanks to them. So I feel very fortunate that my parents didn't put that kind of pressure on me and never, and they gave me grace. They gave me grace to pursue what I wanted to do.
mm. Have they had a chance to read Bo Baby?
My mom's read it. My dad, as she described to me, my dad read it for all the parts about himself.
Mm,
So I think that it's very on brand, and I think also that's probably a little bit of the reason for the conflict because he's not seeing his whole arc, his whole in context, right? He's seeing like, why would you write that? Why would you say that? Why would you? But I think now that the book has been out and so many people have been so complimentary, like, I mean, people are like, your parents need to write a book. We want to read their book, like they're heroes. They're so brave. They're so courageous. It was meant to be a love letter to my parents and a tribute to them and to honor them. And by extension, obviously, the millions of parents out there who are making sacrifices for their kids every day. So, yes, my mom read it cover to cover. My dad read it, the parts about him, but it's all water under the bridge now.
mm. Yeah, thank you, Vicky and Betty.
Yeah, I'm back. Thank you, Vicky, for the cover.
Of
So
course.
yeah, thank you. I when I told my parents and my in-laws that I was going to run for office, it was actually at my birthday dinner. So my husband and I had a plan. We had already talked about it as a family, together, made this decision because you don't run on your own. You run as a family unit. And so we had the birthday dinner. We had one of those private rooms at a restaurant, and then I was like, okay, everybody, I need your attention. And then I told them I was going to run for office. And my mother-in-law was just really confused. Like, why would you, what? What's a Yamsak, right? What's a county supervisor? What do you do? And then my parents were kind of low-key devastated. They were just like, why, like, why put yourself in harm? Like, they felt that it's a dangerous place to be, potentially dangerous place to be. They worried then, they still worry now. And that was why I wanted to talk to them in this very dramatic setting, right? I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna run. Dad, you can't fight everybody who says a bad thing about your daughter. Mom, you can't
Mhm.
go arguing with people or shouting at them. Like everybody chill." And that's when I told my sisters were there too. And basically it's like I got thick skin. Being raised Vietnamese really creates that outer layer of protection. Um, and because like Vicky, as you were saying, every greeting was just a comment on your weight, your appearance, your hair, and there's never a right size, there's never a right look, and there's never right? And how you show up. But it's they were worried. And the thing is that like I mean they weren't opposed to it, they were just really worried
Mm.
how
That
would I
makes
be able to fare, and that it's a really ugly place to be. And as refugees, right, that really shapes a lot of their understanding of politics. And my dad was talking to me. He just said, I've seen countries come crumble. I've seen power rise and power fall. And the thing is, like, politics is an ugly place to be. So if, like, please take care of yourself.
mm.
So that was the jam. Now, in terms, I mean, Vicky, what you're talking about in terms of grace and acceptance, like I've already pulled my parents through so many ups and downs. Like at one point in my life, I wanted to be a nail technician. I wanted to be a makeup artist. I wanted to open up my own boba shop. I mean, it's just they in whatever course I took, they just always followed me and just say, hey, just do you. So I've been very blessed and very lucky in that sense.
And how do they feel about your career now, if I may sneak in a question?
Oh, they're super proud. They're super proud, but they're also very like they're very but young. That's how they would say it, right? They're not they didn't come from politics. They didn't come from any like none this world is so foreign to them in every single way. They're
Hmm.
laborers. And so they're just really proud, but they also don't go announcing. They don't tell people but what their daughter does or who their daughter is. But they
Yep.
pick up all the gossip and they bring it back to me. Um yeah, they're very proud. They're also very worried. Every single time I'm on a press conference, they see me on TV talking about another challenge or another situation. Another, like District 2 is where a lot of the ICE presence has been, and then the highest number of deportations has come out of my district. So I know, Viet, earlier you said that the persecution of ICE against our immigrant communities is your position, and not attributing to the guests, but that's my position too, and I've been very vocal about that. So they're very proud. They also have this constant sense of just uneasiness about how this world's going to shape out.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was growing up in the 70s and 80s. My parents said exactly the same thing. And they had come straight out of Vietnam at that point, and obviously during a period of revolutionary and civil war. And, the authorities were not to be trusted. There was a time when my parents were saying, don't call the police. The police were not our friends. That's what they knew in Vietnam. Don't take a public position. Don't be political. These were all lessons that they had learned the hard way in Vietnam for very obvious reasons. So this brings us back to our opening question. Obviously, both of you have become successful in your respective careers. You've obviously overcome obstacles and so on, which in many ways we can probably guess what those are. But I'm curious now, 2026, we could be optimistic. We could say, look, we have Vicky Nguyen as an NBC News anchor. We have Betty Duong as a Santa Clara County supervisor. I'm kind of a pessimist. I think there are obstacles. I think there are challenges out there. What do you think, given the fact that we have two very significant Vietnamese American, Asian American women here, and there's many others we could point to across the landscape? I'm sure there are still obstacles out there for Asian American, Vietnamese American women. What do you think those are for you? And I'm sure you're thinking about them because your parents as well, and your children will face something, some kind of
Mhm.
obstacle and challenge. Vicky, what do you think is the biggest obstacle for Asian American women out there?
I mean, I think, gosh, it's funny because I've never really led with my identity. I don't think that I really even thought of myself as like I got to be out there for Vietnamese American women and Asian American women because for so long it was kind of conditioned out of me. I just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to like keep my head down, do the things, step by step, climb the career ladder. And also, like, leaning into your identity wasn't something that was going to help you in any space. So you just needed to like power through. And I'm so grateful that there was a sort of a little revolution. I think a lot of it for me personally was COVID and being on a national network at a time where there was such a spike in anti-Asian racism. And I felt like, wait a minute, I actually need to call this out. I need to spotlight the FBI data. This isn't something we're all imagining. These are people who look like my parents who are being attacked in the street, who are being accused of bringing this virus here. It was just like kind of an awakening for me that it's okay to bring my whole self into what I do, and that it's okay for me to provide that voice for people and to shine a light on some of those stories in a way that is not necessarily advocacy journalism. It is that I can connect with this community and bring these stories in an authentic way that people might not feel as safe talking to another reporter if they don't have that shorthand, right, of being Asian American. And I really credit like Dion Lim, who was doing a lot of that reporting in the Bay Area. She was really putting this stuff on her social media. And then Janelle Wang also, and I felt like Betty Yu. So I just felt like, okay, there's a safe pathway here. I have a really big megaphone. Let me do this. And to the credit of the Today Show producers and the credit of Nightly News, they greenlit me to do those stories. And so that made me feel like, whoa, I'm giving myself permission finally to actually be able to say I'm a Vietnamese American person, and these are some of those perspectives that I can bring to my reporting that makes it more fulsome, more complete, not biased, but complete. I think there's a difference. And and it's crazy that it took me that long, but I really was conditioned also in a job where you really need to try to be fair and objective and not bring yourself into the story. You are never to make the story about yourself. But when it is a story about the community that you come from, you can't help it, and that's okay. So I'm glad that it came late, better late than never. And now I really embrace it. And I feel like we're in a period where it's great to be Asian American. And sure, people are always going to judge you based on your skin color, your gender, whatever else. But I don't spend a lot of time focused on that because it's not something that I can change about myself. What I can do is just be the best at what I do, try to spotlight as many voices as I can to help people understand and learn and tear down barriers. And when I'm out in the community, because I have the opportunity to travel to all these different places, I've lived in Florida, I've lived in California, New York, Arizona, Nevada. I get to listen to people and ask them why they feel the way that they feel. And then I get to share maybe a little bit of how I feel. And I don't expect to change anyone's mind in that minute. And I don't expect to get into an argument. But I just hope that a few of the nuggets that I share, they think about maybe a week or two or a month from now. And maybe it just opens the aperture, opens their perspective a little bit. And I think that's something that we all can do instead of being so quick to shut everybody down to figure out what color box they check when they're voting. Never, I think, have we lived in a time when people needed to know immediately what party you're a part of. And I long for those days again. And I think that it's important for us to have those conversations instead of just staying in our little corner and assuming that we know how everybody else feels. So I think the biggest challenge is really just trying to be a person who can relate to as many different people as possible and disarm them with kindness. Honestly, I just think that's what it is. I think we have a lack of communication and open minds right now in this country because it's so heated and everything quickly becomes politically divisive. And I think we have to get back to the grassroots of just this is a fellow human being. This is a neighbor. This is a fellow churchgoer. This is somebody who's a parent of a kid at your school. Treat them as such. And I hope we can get back to having those great, honest conversations.
Thanks, Vicky. Betty, what's the biggest obstacle you think Asian American and Vietnamese American women face now?
I think it's still the same that we've always faced, right? Like visibility, presence, and a seat at the table, whatever the metaphors are, right? Asian American women and Vietnamese American women in particular, Southeast Asian women, are often left out of any type of conversation about power dynamics, about social safety nets, about the democracy of the world. So in the space that I'm in, to this day, I'm I people still don't know that I'm the supervisor, right? And the thing is like there's only five of us at a county that has 24,000 employees. And so when I'm going across the county from department to department, it happens on a regular basis where where people will talk to me not realizing I'm the supervisor and assume that or even in spaces in community in the district, right? People don't follow politics as much as we some of us politicians think they do. And people are just asking, "Oh, when does the supervisor get here? What does he look like?" I was like, "No, that's a she, it's me." And I still see people not knowing what to make of me when they realize I'm the supervisor or, because what we do is we manage a $13.5 billion budget and we basically decide on how to knit the safety net together to make sure that people have housing, access to healthcare, food. We also run the child welfare system, the foster care system. We run all the hard things in life, right? When people meet their hardest moments, that's what the county's job is. So I take this role with great severity, knowing the weight of my decisions. 1 out of 5 votes. I'm 1 out of 5 vote. 3 votes on this board changes the world for possibly 2.1 million people. Um, and the thing is that I had worked at the county for 11 years before taking on this position. And when I started at the county, I grew up translating for my mom and dad. And then I went to work at the county as a full-blown adult as an attorney. And I was being asked to provide Vietnamese translation at the help window because they didn't have a Vietnamese speaker. And those are one of the moments where I was so angry. I remember I was shaking that day, how angry I was that, you know, um, as a kid, I was at that same window translating for my family and we hadn't done better.
Mm-hmm.
So language, when we were talking about language access for a long time, when you talk about language access at the county, it didn't include Cambodian languages, Vietnamese languages, Southeast Asian refugees, right? Even though they are a significant part of the demographic of the communities relying on our safety net services. Um, when we finally had a Vietnamese health assessment in 2011, the first of its kind, still the only one, and we need to have a follow-up one, right? We learned that the leading cause of death for Vietnamese American men in Santa Clara County, that's how specific it is liver cancer. And one of the slowest growing cancers, one of the preventable, one of the most treatable cancers. When we talked about domestic violence and the Vietnamese American community, we didn't even have a word for it. There was not a polite word or way to bring up domestic violence, intimate partner violence, to bring up sexual violence, right? So we still have a long ways to go. We've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. I love that my daughter grows up being very proud to be Vietnamese and there's like this sharing of culture amongst her and her friends. I'm very proud that I won an election in a district that required equal parts Latino votes, Vietnamese votes, and white votes, right? You rarely see that type of demographic breakdown and electoral politics in a district. That I had to rely on all of my communities to believe in my candidacy. So and it's we still need to be seen. We still need to be part of the conversation. We're still largely invisible. And even at this position, the role that I'm in, I'm still largely invisible when compared to my counterparts. And the fact that it was only, I think, a month ago that I was sitting on the dais an open session teaching my colleagues about the model minority myth, because someone had called it a privilege. And so this is how rudimentary these conversations are. And the thing is that like it wasn't just a conversation of semantics. The model minority myth and the assumptions that comes from it, when translated into policy, will lead to people's death and negative outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So we still have a lot to do in that space. And at the county level where I sit, behavioral health services, intimate partner violence, um, and safety and food security and all the things, food security, healthcare access, right? How do we support our moms? How do we support our families? And how do we support the family unit, which really, at the center of it is the mom. And the landscape keeps on shifting and in a very sad trajectory. So, we started this conversation about violence in the political space. We are experiencing this massive trauma right now. The impacts of HR1, the pulling back of food support, of healthcare, pushing people off of Medi-Cal, all the new requirements to stay on Medi-Cal is are deliberate acts of violence against poor people. And it's very troubling to me that when I have these conversations with fellow policymakers at all levels of government, that Vietnamese Americans, Asian American women in particular, are not part of that conversation. They're not part of that landscape of considerations of who we need to make sure we take care of.
Mm-hmm.
My
That
goodness.
sounded like a downer.
No, yeah. I mean, I think it's real, right? And especially in during April. I mean, I think both of you kind of Vicky, your Boat Baby was published last year with the paperback edition this year, and then Betty, your sort of co coming into the office was also during 2025 at the 50th anniversary of the Vietnamese American community and 50 years since the end of the Vietnam slash American War slash Second Indochina War. We're a year later in April again, and we're here with both of y'all, incredible Vietnamese American women who are sharing all of the different obstacles that y'all are tackling, t taking on, head first as trailblazers. We have got some questions in our Q&A from our audience that we'd like to pitch to y'all. The first one that maybe we'll start with, just kind of going off of the riffing off of what you shared about mothers. Betty is from Minnie Fabian's son, who actually tuned in from Sydney, Australia. And they would one of part of their question is to ask y'all, how is it that y'all navigate these Vietnamese inbuilt or built-in cultural traits into the raising of your American-born children, if you're willing to share.
Betty, how old are your kids?
We have a 29-year-old son and an 9-year-old daughter. She just turned 9 last week.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. I have a 9-year-old daughter too.
Mhm. The good
I'll
age.
just say, I'll say, so I have a 17, 14, and 9. They're all girls. And I think it's kind of hysterical because growing up, like many of you, words of affection were not used. I didn't hear, I love you, I'm proud of you, nothing like that to that effect. And that was just, it was fine because I understand now my parents showed love by like cutting up the fruit to make asking if I've eaten yet. Like there's a billion ways they showed love. They just didn't use the words that I heard from all my other friends whose parents were like, wow, you got an A. We're so proud of you. I was like, well, what's that like? And now I see them as Vietnamese American grandparents to my daughters. So they're like, oh, I hear it all. I hear, I love you. I hear, we're proud of you. All these things. And it's so amazing to see their evolution, raising me as Vietnamese parents and now as Vietnamese American grandparents to my children. And I will just say that I think for my kids, I think a lot about the privilege that they have, frankly, and how fortunate that they are, and that how am I going to help them foster grit and resilience? Because for us, it was built in. We just grew up and we saw our parents working hard, and we were around a lot of people in the community who were just hustling and doing whatever. And then for me, those formative years, when I went back to Vietnam as a kid and realized, wow, my life would have been so different if my parents had stayed here. Maybe I would have stopped education at eighth grade. We were visiting my family members who lived in villages with no running water, where the toilet was just like the hole in the ground with the two little like plastic parts for you to put your feet. And so to me, as an 11-year-old from Santa Rosa, California, who had like McDonald's Happy Meals whenever I wanted, got to go to Walden Books and had like Hello Kitty stickers, this was a wake up call of wow, I could see my cousins were happy. It wasn't like I thought of them as less than. I just recognized how much access I had and how many opportunities I had. Even as an 11-year-old, I don't know if I thought of it that way. I just went back with this sense of like, I can't take my life for granted. I've got to like try to make the most of this life that I have here in America. But my kids don't have that, right? They've grown up in a pretty comfortable way. And so I think it's having a lot of conversations with them so that they know what their grandparents went through, the sacrifices they made, how to teach them the value of money. I encourage like all of my kids to get summer jobs. I think there's nothing better than like having to work with the public and like earn a wage. Um, so those are some of the things I try to replicate from my childhood. I try to let my kids have those tough conversations with their teachers. I'm not the parent that's like, what's going on? Let me send an email to your coach. I go, oh, you want to quit Taekwondo? I mean, this is credit to my husband too. He was like, okay, that's fine. You can quit Taekwondo. You will tell Master O that you're quitting. And so, like, it's those things that I think about. What did my parents do out of necessity? What can I do out of like guidance and choice? And I think my kids are under different kinds of pressures too, with social media and other, aspects of modern life, AI, that I don't have to manufacture too much hardship, but I'm trying to really instill in them the values of hard work, of being of service to other people, of, helping where you can and making a positive impact, with your talents and your skill set. So, with great, what is it, privilege comes great responsibility. I try to instill that to them too.
Mm, thank you. Yeah, breaking cycles of intergenerational trauma, one Vietnamese and cultural trait at a time. uh, transforming them into things that might be Vietnamese American, perhaps a little bit more healing. Betty, you.
My daughter is growing up just bubble wrapped in privilege, right? Like there's layers of privilege. I mean, there's the where we are today, my husband and I in life compared to where our parents were when they were raising us. The fact that I'm an elected, right? And I bring her to as many of my political events as possible, but she limits me to one event per week now. So choose wisely. It's every generation of children is another social experiment in parenting. I feel like I read all these books about positive parenting, about supportive parenting, about how to raise successful children, and it's just depending on the year that was written, it's just vastly different from each other. But down to being actively engaged in your child's life. So I talk to my daughter a lot. My husband and I, we talk as a family a lot, and we have a rule of always being honest with each other. We could be brutally honest, we could be graphically honest, and we could be honest. And so I temper the language to grow with her and what she's receiving. And I think my big goal is to make sure that she has an emotional vocabulary that could help her interact with the world, to identify her needs, to identify her fears, and to be able to identify what safety is. I think that's always been like the kind of the core of the parenting. Now, we speak English in this household, right? And I don't even know how that came to be because I speak Vietnamese more in the world than I do in my own household. My husband speaks a level of Vietnamese that confuses me. Like he's got all the slang words down and everything like that. So our daughter is learning Vietnamese as a second language. It's really important for me that she has that cultural foundation, that she understands her people's history. Um, knows it. I think we're all gonna learn
Mm.
how we're all making sense of it and processing it as we age, right? Probably for the rest of our lives, but that she has a connection and an engagement with it. She goes to a Vietnamese dual language immersion program, which is like, wow, like it's the only program, it's a brand new program, in the Allen Rock School District over in East Side. She goes to Vietnamese school on Sunday on top of that, and she's like, "What did I do, mom?" Like, I'm like, "This is not punishment. This is a gift, okay?" Like, I swear to God. And we just have the same way my dad had a really honest conversation with me starting at 10 years old about the patriarchy of the world. I try to have that level of honesty with her too. And I share the same concerns, Vicky. How do I make sure my kid has grit like for the world? And 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 also really my hopes for her is to have full agency in choosing what her life is. That's really it. You know, that's big. I'm still figuring this parenting thing out. So maybe you check in with me in a couple years. Like, it's ever evolving between our first kid and our second kid, right? Like it's a big age gap, and it's my stepson. So if anyone's doing the math out there, like I'm not trying to like confuse anybody. Um, and and uh um and I love him the same way I love my daughter. I've been with him since he was 8 years old. So we grew up together. But yeah, it's a yeah, just we're really honest. Like my daughter understand, well, I don't know if she understands, but the words patriarchy, the words feminism, the concepts of that are things that we introduced to her very early on in her upbringing, and we're going to keep on talking about that to undo some of the generational traumas that I think all of us are still shedding. And so maybe this is part of my process too.
I'm very familiar with these things. My children know the words racism, colonialism, I think feminism too. I'm going to double check with them right after this show that they know that word as well. Bubble wrapped in privilege is one way to describe how this new generation grows up, if we're lucky enough to give our children that bubble wrap of privilege, as we've been discussing here. I find it inspiring to see 51 years after the arrival of a large wave of Vietnamese refugees into the United States that we have two strong Vietnamese American women with us today, Vicky Nguyen, the news anchor, and Betty Duong, the Santa Clara County supervisor, who have showed us the obstacles that they have overcome, the challenges they faced as individuals, but the challenges we all face as members of a Vietnamese American community, an Asian American community, but also of the United States as a whole. And I hope everyone that's listening out there has taken some inspiration from the accomplishments of our guests, but also taken a dose of a challenge that there is so much more to change out there, regardless of the progress that we've made. Thanks so much to Vicky and to Betty and to my co-host Philip Nguyen, as they have joined us on this episode of Trailblazers and Feminists that we should be proud of on Accented Dialogues in Diaspora.
Thank y'all so much for joining tonight. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and Philip, thank you so much. It was, I mean, and Betty, thank you. I really enjoyed listening to all of your answers. They're so thoughtful, and like it's obvious that you are so well versed in your community, the needs. Like, I can't believe you've only been on the job for a year and 4 months, but like, I think the answer to a lot of the political like violence and all of this is to get more women in
Yeah.
leadership positions, quite frankly. I mean, even down to the question of like wars and all of that. You think about Jacinda Ardern over from like New Zealand, how she handled her country's many crises, like the mass shootings. And I just think when you have women who are mothers in leadership roles, you have a very different world.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, so I'm so happy and proud to see you, to be here with you. Viet and Philip, thank you for putting us together. And I could listen to Betty. And your questions were amazing, by the way. Thank you so much. Like just amazing. Really
Yeah.
appreciate being a part of
Thank you
this.
so much for making this so comfortable. I mean, I think if you had asked me for my social security number, I probably would have given it. Like I felt so at ease.
Oh, okay, I can do that.
Vicky, always a pleasure. We got to spend a lot of time together when she was in San Jose for her book launch. So it's been a nice reunion, Vicky. So
It
good to
was.
see you.
I adore you, Betty, and I wish you the very best. And so, wow, it's a 12-year term?
It's 12 years. Each year is a 4-year term. You get a max of 3 terms, so 12 years. So every 4 years there's a job performance review called a re-election, and I'll see if my bosses like me, if they'll keep
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we appreciate it. It was so nice to see you all.